I, 29M, and my wife, 30F, have 2 kids, 5M, 3M. My wife works a full-time office job, while I work from home with extremely flexible hours. Basically, as long as I meet my deadlines, no one really cares how many hours it took or what time of day I work outside of some Zoom meetings. My sister, 26F, let's call her Barb, and her husband, 30M, let's call him Nick, live nearby and work full-time jobs. They have a daughter, 5F, let's call her Tracy. Because of my comfortable work schedule, when our kids started going to daycare, we basically decided that I'll be dropping off and picking up my niece from daycare alongside my own kids. I didn't really mind, and I thought it was great for my kids to spend time with their cousin. I get along with Tracy as well, and always thought I was her cool uncle. She's a sweet kid and usually well-behaved. So anyway, most days I bring her and my kids back to our house. I make them snacks or dinner, and in the afternoon/evening my sister comes to pick them up. A few days ago, the 5-year-old kids were watching Bluey on the TV as I was preparing snacks with my 3-year-old, and I suddenly heard yelling. I rushed over to see what's up, and my son was yelling at her that, "My dad's not a girl." While my niece yells back, "He is. He's a faggot. That's like a girl." The word is different in my language, but the meaning holds, as is the distinction between using it versus simply addressing a gay person. I'm kind of in shock at first, but I turned off the TV, and I sat her down and began explaining that this is a very bad word and we shouldn't be calling people that, and that regardless, I'm not a girl. And because this is a bad word, she should apologize to me because we don't act mean to each other in this family. And if I hear this again, I'm going to talk to her parents and she's going to get in trouble. She said she won't get in trouble because that's what her dad called me, and he's not in trouble. I was stunned. I told her that regardless of what her dad said, it's a very bad word and she's not to use it with me or in my presence, and that she should apologize regardless because it hurt my feelings, which she did, because she's a really good kid. We talked some more and I prodded her about other things her parents said, and from what I gather, getting info out of a 5-year-old being obviously a difficult and unreliable process, Nick, my BIL, told my sister in Tracy's presence that men shouldn't be sitting at home all day and doing childcare, that cooking is a woman's duty, as is cleaning and really most of the things I do around my house. And that I'm a girl. I interpret this as not really a man, because I do housework and my wife earns more money than me. I explained to her the best I could that men and women could work from an office or from home, and that my wife or Barb working long hours from the office doesn't make them men, and vice versa, but I didn't dwell on it with her since it's not really her fault. I didn't immediately bring it up with my sister because I figured it would be a difficult conversation and I didn't want to have it in front of the kids, and I wanted to talk it out with my wife first as well. I did talk to my wife that evening, and she seemed really upset as well. I told her that I think I should demand an apology from Nick and my sister, and she agreed. I called my sister and told her what happened, and she said that it's just a word and I'm blowing it out of proportion, and obviously Nick doesn't dislike me. I said I don't care whether he does or doesn't dislike me. He is talking shit about me behind my back to my niece and to her, and she is apparently very chill about this, rather than standing up for me. She said that was how Nick was, and I should stop being a drama queen. I told her to fuck off, and if that was how she felt, she could pick up her own child from daycare, and hung up. I know it was really short notice and rude, but I really felt like I was being disrespected by people I did so much for over the years, and were my family. My wife said she understood, and that I shouldn't back down until I at least get a proper apology. The next 2 days were a weekend and there was no daycare. I assumed there would be calls or texts from Barb, but there was nothing. In fact, the suspicious lack of any messages or calls made me think she didn't take my words seriously, and this actually got me even more angry. The calls did come when it was time to pick up Tracy for daycare, and I, obviously, didn't come. I dropped my own kids off and didn't even answer for a while. I know it was petty, but I was stewing for 2 days and figured letting Barb stew for a few hours seemed really appropriate and felt really good. Around noon, when she called again, I did pick up. I was going to smugly tell her that I was ready for my apology and we would put it behind us, but I didn't get to. Instead, she went off on me about how I was irresponsible and I flaked, and she was so late for work because of me, to which I just said, "I told you I wasn't going to pick her up. You had 2 days to make arrangements." And she kept yelling at me, so I hung up again. She kept calling and sending me texts about picking Tracy up from daycare, to which I said I will not be, then stopped replying. When I came to pick my kids up, Tracy was expecting me to take her as well, and I didn't, which was very rough on me and her both. Like, I know it's not her fault and she's 5, and she suddenly doesn't get to go over to our place and play and have snacks, but at the same time, I didn't want to just let this thing go. I felt like I deserved an apology, and still do. So I explained that me and her mom were fighting, but I'll pick her up again when we work it out. She obviously didn't take it well, because she's 5. But I apologized, took my kids and left. Well, a bit later I got a call from my mom. Barb roped her into picking up Tracy, but my mom is disabled. So she was having a really hard time with Tracy and asked me why I was being mean to Barb. I told her everything, expecting her to take my side, but instead she also pulled a, "You know how Nick is." To which I replied that the more I realize how Nick is, the less I like it. And if he thinks all this shit in general and about me specifically, I sure as fuck ain't going to be doing free labor for him. She said I was blowing this all out of proportion, and I told her I wasn't the one doing it, because all I asked for was a fucking apology, and everyone else seemed to prefer all of this shit to just giving it to me. To which she said I should just be the bigger man and not let it get to me, to which I said I was done and to have fun with Tracy. That evening I got a call from Nick himself, which I was hesitant about, but chose to answer on the off chance that I was actually about to get that apology. Nope. Apparently my behavior is causing Barb great distress, and we're family, and how can I do this to my own sister? I told him that since we're family, how can he talk shit about me to his kid, which I take care of daily, and he said he was only joking, and it was all in good fun. I told him it was neither good nor fun for me, and I want my apology. He blew up on me, telling me I was a F***********T and couldn't take a joke, and called me a hysterical little girl. I told him to fuck off and that I was done with him and hung up. This led to a bunch of calls from Barb and my mom, which I didn't answer. Barb texted me that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price for me being petty, and I told her that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price of her parents being ungrateful pieces of shit, to which she just yelled at me a bunch about how she was going to lose her job and I was being cruel to her and to mom. I told her I was done, and unless her next message was an apology, I will be blocking her number, and it wasn't. So now I blocked her. Past few days my mom's been picking up Tracy, and it's been really rough seeing her in daycare and explaining that grandma's going to pick her up, which she hates, and tells me she isn't having fun with grandma and wants to come over to our place, and it's breaking my heart, but at the same time, I never got a single apology from anyone but the 5 years old, and I feel like letting this go would just be telling my family that it's okay to ignore my boundaries. But at the same time, I do love my niece, and I don't want to traumatize her or have her resent me. She is a good kid, and none of it is her fault. So, Ada, and what do I do? Edit. Holy crap, you guys. Post barely been up 4 hours, and I am already so grateful for all your support and advice. The angle of Nick actually wanting Barb to quit her job is not one I considered, but now I think it might actually have merit, and it makes me very worried for her. At the same time, I can't really do much until she at least acknowledges that that's just how Nick is, so stop overreacting isn't going to fly with me. I also assume it's only a matter of time until my mom is no longer an option. She's already having a hard time. So I hope I get a chance to talk to her about it. Ideally because she sees my point of view, but I'll settle for because she's desperate. I don't know what sort of childcare they'll be able to afford. They took out a large mortgage on a house they can barely afford. I will also make certain to stress upon Tracy that I love her, and none of this is her fault. Thank you all. Relevant comments. OP shouldn't cut off the contact with his niece, but have serious talks with Nick and Barb about their language uses toward family. OP, I really hope to do that. How do I go about it though? Do I keep picking her up, but go and see with the rest of them at all other times? I genuinely don't want to take it out on her, but how do I stand up for myself without doing that? OP on why his 5-year-old kid is not in school yet. OP, they will be starting school next year. My kid turned 5 recently and wasn't eligible yet, and they decided to hold off on Tracy so that they could go together. OP on if his wife and other adults know about Nick's behaviors. OP, you're not wrong. This isn't the first time we butted heads. The other instances were just resolved, I thought. Like when he first started showing up for family/holiday meals, he'd just sit with my dad and watch football, soccer, or withy, while I was playing host or minding the kids, and not get up to clear the dishes even when my dad did. So I called him out on it a few times and he does it now, which is why I thought, yeah, he probably wasn't really taught any better, but he could change. But then again, he would also leave terrible tips for waiting staff. But on that I assumed that had to do with his financial situation. So me and my wife started to just pick up the tab because we can afford it and don't really mind. And we'd be paying for my parents anyway since my mom doesn't work anymore. So I don't know, he was never my favorite guy, but he seemed to make my sister happy. She had a few terrible relationships before him, so I would pick my battles. He never told me anything as overtly sexist/homophobic as that, so I just figured he was just not my type of guy, but didn't really confront him unless I felt it was warranted. I certainly wouldn't let slurs slide, but I don't recall him really using any in my presence before. And he doesn't really spend any time with my kids anyway, so I was never too worried about his presence around them. As for my sister, she is my sister, and we used to be very close. Hell, before this shit I thought we still were close. But now that I think about it, I think she kind of became more withdrawn these past few years, because we used to talk about everything, especially around my mom's diagnosis. She has multiple sclerosis, and her being so willing to overlook someone talking like that about me actually caught me totally by surprise. Still, I don't know if I want to cut her off completely, but also, obviously I can't just ignore her excusing Nick's behavior. Opie responds to comments on how he chose to work from home and letting his wife be the one who works outside the house. Opie, I totally get you, man. I used to work an insanely demanding job when I was fresh out of college, and it just brought me no joy at all. Like, my wife really loves her career and she's crushing it, and I'm super happy for her, but for me, my job isn't my calling. My job is my job, and I do it well. I just do it so I can afford fun stuff for the people I love. The time I spend with my wife and kids is what it's all about for me. Opie ongoing low contact with his sister and her husband, but not his niece, and clarifies on the financial levels. Opie, hey. So I think this actually might be the play here because I genuinely feel like shit for not picking her up and my kids miss her. I might have an honest conversation with my sister when we both cooled off though, because she's my sister, but Nick can get fucked, and I will not tolerate this shit again, and don't want to be taken for granted. We are better off financially than they are. Our house isn't bigger and our cars aren't fancier, but we are completely debt-free. My wife alone makes about as much as the two of them combined, and she got some really solid investments going, according to her. I don't know shit about investments. What I make is decent, but not as much by any means. More than Barb, but less than Nick. But it basically pays for our recreation, hobbies, vacations, etc. They live in a bigger house and drive nicer cars, but they're paying off a mortgage and loans, so they can't really afford to quit/cut back hours/childcare, which is part of how we ended up here in the first place, since I love Tracy and didn't really mind. Update 1. Alright, so I posted this yesterday and was genuinely overwhelmed by the comments, advice, and support. I'd like to thank everyone for it and feel this warrants an update. Just to clarify a few things. My dad died from a heart attack 2 years ago, which came as no surprise because he smoked a lot and lived a pretty unhealthy life. So we weren't really surprised. It wasn't his first either. He was a great grandpa and a great dad before that and right up to the end. But his death left my mom alone, and she doesn't work. My mom has MS, which is basically mostly steady, but slowly gets worse over time and flares up occasionally and is made worse by stress, which my mom goes through now. A flare-up often means the level she gets back to isn't quite what it was before, so we mostly try to keep her stress-free. My dad had life insurance, so her house is paid for and she had a little money, but there's also a caretaker coming over 3 times a week to clean, cook, do shopping, etc., which she can't afford, so me and my wife pay for. As I mentioned in a comment on the original post, me and my wife are doing probably better off financially than Barb and Bill. They have a fancy house and fancy cars, but they have a mortgage and loans. So, the great response I got made me think about this shit again, and I thought how I could stand my ground without giving up on Tracy altogether, and figured there was no perfect solution, and I had to settle on something. I took the day off work because I just needed to process and deal with this shit. One comment on the original post really got to me, about how someone would feel in Tracy's place, and I just can't do it to her now. I know this isn't the update some of you have wanted, but I just can't. I love her like she was one of my own, and my kids do as well, and it's not her fault. I unblocked my sister because obviously if I'm going to be interacting with her child, she needs to be able to reach me. I talked to my mom during the day and she was again distraught about having to pick Tracy up, which is pretty hard on her. I told her I was willing to do it, but I'm coming over and she's going to have to hear me out, to which she agreed. I talked to her for a long time, avoiding snark and lashing out this time, and just explaining that basically how serious Nick was or how he is doesn't matter. I used that rocking the boat analogy someone linked to in comments, and further stressed my point by saying that it shouldn't matter if I was justified or not in getting upset. I am her child, and if something upset me, it at least warrants giving me the benefit of the doubt before siding against me, and eventually it seemed to come through. She apologized and we hugged it out, and I think she got it. She's not a very confrontational person and generally really tries to keep the peace, and this time she went about it wrong. I'm not saying I'm not mad, but she's my mom and she apologized. I explained to her that she shouldn't be covering for me because that means I have no leg to stand on when confronting Nick and Barb, and she was receptive to it. I texted my sister that we needed to talk and I'll drop Tracy off at their place tonight, to which I got a stoic thumbs up. I picked Tracy up from daycare today, and she was overjoyed. She was actually a little possessive of me, staying by my side all afternoon instead of running off to play, which was cute but also made me feel like shit a little, because that's impact me not picking her up. I explained to the best of my ability that she's not in trouble and I'm not angry with her, but I am angry with her parents and we need to work that out. But I'll do my best to not stop picking her up anymore, which she was really happy about. I dropped her off in the evening, and once she was in bed I sat down to talk with Barb and Nick. I told them flat out that Mom wasn't going to be covering for them anymore, and if they didn't let me finish what I had to say, I would get up and leave. And they can find new arrangements for Tracy. Didn't mean it, but they don't need to know that. They weren't happy, but they were willing to listen. So that's progress, or at least the threat working. I explained that this was the situation now. I don't need them to mean their apology, but I sure as fuck was going to need one. This was principle now. I have spent years taking care of their child, and if they wanted to be assholes, I wasn't going to do it for free. So this was how it goes now. I am no longer going to be dropping her off in the morning until further notice. There was no excuse for the way Nick acted, and it needed to have some lasting impact. I was no longer going to be paying for family outings and family vacations. It was a man's job to support his family, so good luck with that. The exception is Tracy, who is always welcome. If I hear any more BS being talked about me behind my back, I was going to start charging them for my service. My plan was to dangle the thing they want, childcare, restoring it, but at the same time giving some repercussions and threat of things getting hard for them again. I also laid it on pretty thick about how I am a man, so I obviously have my pride and can't have that be disrespected, even by my own family who I obviously love. Don't really consider Nick family, but figured he wouldn't figure that out. Nick was not happy about this, and my sister actually had to take him outside to talk it out without me, but eventually they did agree to it, and I got my, admittedly half-hearted, apology. I could probably press it further, but I didn't want to risk having to either back down or hurt Tracy again. So I took this. There were no tears and no warm hugs, but I get to walk away with what I wanted, giving them some payback without having to give up my time with Tracy. I still plan to talk to my sister alone about her relationship with Nick and about how she sees me, but I figure I should let things calm down a bit before I do. I know this isn't the resolution some, maybe most, of you wanted. But at the end of the day, I need to find a solution I can live with, and for me this is it. We'll update if anything changes. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. You were paying for their family vacations? Damn. OP. I thought I was paying for our family vacations, and honestly, because my wife makes more than me and is mostly the one in charge of our finances, she could be considered the one paying, since her income basically keeps us housed and fed while my salary is the having fun fund. She was actually always very excited about this since she doesn't have much family remaining, so having Barb, Nick and Tracy alongside her sisters always made her feel like she had a big family, and she felt this justified the expense and made her really happy. Obviously, she is now furious with them because I don't think either of us will feel comfortable paying for them again, and they probably can't afford to come along. I do hope we will still get to bring Tracy along, at least. I have no intention of ever paying for them again because there is no world in which I would feel comfortable doing so. There was a trust in their love and good intentions there that is broken now, and I don't think can ever be repaired. Just because I didn't want to take my anger out on Tracy, it doesn't mean it's gone. The apology was important as an act of them acknowledging my feelings and priorities. But obviously, I'm not going to forgive and forget based on a half-hearted apology I forced them into. I intend to keep minimal contact outside of Tracy stuff. One day in the future, I may need to have a conversation with Barb and give her another chance because she's still my sister. But even then, in terms of material support, I clearly overindulged them, and this will no longer be the case.